once again, welcome to the Radical Imagination, Real Talk in the Hamptons. I'm your host, Jim Vetros, and I'm welcoming you all back to our second segment for this incredible show that we are doing with two incredible people on protecting the most vulnerable in our community here. And we are dialoguing with Daniel O'Shea, who's the executive director of Maureen's Haven, and with Reverend Dr. Ben Shambaugh of St. Luke's Episcopal Church. And this is these two are vital members of an action committee and community that is really trying to make a difference in the most vulnerable, the lives of the most vulnerable in this community. So we finished the first segment, in a sense, interested in talking about some of the broader solutions here. We've talked about spiritual resiliency, the fact that your overnight sheltering program is going to end in 9 days. So what are we now going to prepare ourselves for here in our community? You're going to have a lot of pressure on you, right? You're going to have, as you've been articulating, you work very closely with the religious community here. So you're going to say, right, Reverend Ben, I need some help right now. And you're going to go where? To the congregants. So tell us, what's going to happen here, April 1st?
Well, thanks again for having me, and again, thanks, Ben, for joining me. We'll certainly like to try to clarify how, when we say the program ends. So the overnight winter shelter program ends March 31st. Year-round, we are providing critical homeless support services at my facility in Riverhead. So even though the overnight shelter program is going to be ending, which it does every year this time of year, the services that a lot of my guests rely on are still going to continue. And that's a critical part about Maureen's Haven is, even though the program might be winding down, we are still there trying to help elevate people out of homelessness, whether that is, as we were talking earlier, finding employment or just getting onto different housing programs, if they are trying to get into mental health housing or supportive housing, to keep those processes moving forward. You know, our goal is to help people not be in my program next November. And it really is critical for us to continue to connect them to the appropriate level of services year-round.
What realistically are you working with? Do you have enough of these resources that you can work with?
Absolutely
not.
not.
That's the point.
Absolutely not. You know, we like many nonprofits here in the East End, we struggle financially. Unfortunately, homelessness is not very cachet with homelessness. So for me, fundraising is always a challenge. You know, we struggle every year to meet our budgets, and with simply adding more funds would really go a long way to providing the needed, not just salary for case management, but putting the gas in the vans, paying for the drivers, paying for a van repair, bus tickets. You know, one of the things we do pretty often is if somebody comes to me and says, you know, I spoke with my family, they live in Virginia, they want me to come home.
Right.
Let's buy the bus ticket. So we'll buy the bus ticket, we'll get them to Penn Station, because it's more important to spend that little bit limited resources on getting people reconnected with family or getting them into appropriate housing.
Or educational programs.
Educational programs, yeah, sure. We really try to work on a very individualized basis. We are a privately funded independent nonprofit, so that limits the restrictions we have as to what we can and cannot do. So if somebody wants to come in today and said, I need help with a job, well, let's come with the resume, fill out the job application. If somebody comes in and says, again, they want to connect with family out of state, let's buy the bus ticket. You know, we're very fortunate to be very proactive without having to go through many layers of bureaucracy.
How's the response to your fundraising, if I may ask? I mean,
It's a challenge.
It's a challenge.
It's a challenge. You know, we do okay.
Why do you think that's the case?
One of the things is I think people don't realize that there are homeless out here in the Hamptons. I spend a lot of time educating people, educating the community that there are indeed homeless people on the East End. Every year we do a point-in-time count with HUD, which is a national count. This year we're coming in at about 20% of the population in Suffolk County are here on the East End.
Right.
So
And
There is a very significant problem, and
Right.
sometimes it's just hidden and it's right in front of your eyes, and you would never know the difference.
Or people don't want it to be noticed. I mean, quoting from Police Chief Sorello in the Star, it was the 13th of March, he said, "We live in a very, very safe community out here." Well, what would you say to the people in your facility? Is it very, very safe for them? And I'm not trying to make, be unfair here to the police chief, but we do have issues. We do have problems. So if you're just, focused on particular areas and not where you are, everything's going to feel hunky-dory.
Again, that goes back to the misconception about homelessness. Everybody has the conception that somebody's pushing a cart, maybe drinking alcohol, totally disheveled. And yes, you do see those instances. But the reality, especially here on the East End, is that these people have been part of our community for years.
Yes.
Again, I mentioned earlier that people have been in this community for sometimes generations, simply can't afford to live here no more. And they're living in a car by the water. They're living in a shopping center right here on Job's Lane in Southampton. It happens. The other thing too is when we go back to support and funding, and we do coat drives, for example. So we're getting coats that are 2 or 3 year old North Face coats from the Unitarian Church. Okay, they look brand new. Every year, Sacred Heart in Cutchogue, they donate $1,000 so my guests can have brand new boots and sneakers. We do have people that might donate 50 brand new backpacks. I have a large donation room where people are getting clothes that are donated from people in the Hamptons. So they're not always looking or presenting the way you would imagine a homeless person would. They usually want to blend in, and they're trying to blend in. Many of them are trying to acclimate back into society, try to work their way back and to be a productive member of the community. So that's part of it. You just may not even recognize it.
Well, and some of those people are actually working.
Yes.
I go back again to the Latino community.
Yes.
Exactly.
There's a lot of folks here, and it's not recognized, right? Or if it is, we don't pay attention until it hits the news or something. So again, it's this question of serving the community. When I got here, so St. Luke's title is St. Luke's, East Hampton. That's how it's incorporated, right? Well, what does that East Hampton mean? Is that the village or is that the town? And I've always thought it's the town. And what that tells me is that we're here not just for the people who come to church on Sunday who call themselves members.
Which is in the village.
You're
in the village.
We're in the center of the village, the heart of the hand, right? We're right there. But if our area of service is the entire town, and we're really part of the Diocese of Long Island, so all of Long Island. But I mean, my point is that we're not here for the members of our church. We are here for the people of East Hampton. And some of those people are homeless people living in their cars, and some of those people are Spanish-speaking folks who just moved here or working on the, whatever. Okay. So that's kind of a vision, holding up, who are we here for, and what, we're here to help the community, but who is that? And so this is really helpful, to be able to say, hey, these people are people too, and they're right here in front of you.
Right.
What do you say to people who have made a lot of money, and some have really worked very, very hard to get where and came from very humble backgrounds? Many, however, have inherited, perhaps. What do you say? So they've made it. They've made it in the American dream here. What do you say to their mindset, their spirituality, when they insist that, well, this is a sign? It goes back to the old Protestant work ethic here. It's a sign that God has bestowed His grace on me.
So I think
what do you say to those people?
I think what's called the prosperity gospel, which is what you hear on
Rather
TV
than
a lot.
Social gospel.
Yeah, the social gospel is you take care of these people. That's where I am.
Right.
Prosperity gospel, if God loves you, God will bless you and you'll be rich.
And those who haven't been prospering
because
are going to
then
help.
it says, there's a problem with that.
Yeah.
So the scripture that I go back to is Matthew chapter 25, and Jesus says, that, when I was hungry, you gave me food. And the people say, well, when did you do that? And he said, well, whenever you did it to the least of these, you did it to me.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
I think it was FDR said that, you know, a nation will be judged not on how it treats its most wealthy people, but how it treats the people at the bottom, right? That if you are blessed, I'll use that word. If you're blessed, if you're lucky enough to have you know, been really successful, great, congratulations, it's wonderful. So then how do you share those blessings? How do you give back, you know, what you've received? That's kind of the moral challenge, rather than feeling like I must be better than you because I succeeded, right? And it's like, what do I do? And that model of generosity, of philanthropy, that's deep in this community too. I mean, there are people who are extremely wonderfully generous, and you know, and how do we encourage that and build that and not be threatened? You know, I mean, I think everybody who lives here must get hit up by every single charity known to humanity, you know, and so how do you then say actually giving is a joy, not a burden, you know, not a, you know, how do you encourage people to give back?
And where do you draw the line morally, economically, spiritually, with the question of greed? When is enough enough? When, yeah, and.
So I would say the initial question, which,
Okay.
you know, how do you connect with some of these people or change their mind is, I would say, one, come spend some time at my winter shelter program. Get to know some of these
Great,
people.
that's a great point.
You know, and if that is not an experience enough, spend some time at my day center. Spend 2 days with my staff and I, and you will see one, very caring, loving people. As I mentioned earlier, and I mean this to this day, I'm going on 8 years at Maureen's Haven, and we call them guests. They're not clients, they're not patients, they're guests. And some people I know who are chronically homeless, as well as people that we've helped, you know, for the past 5, 6, 8 years, they're like friends.
Yeah.
They're genuine, honest.
And you're
very
breaking down
soulful
the
people.
fear
Right.
that people have. Oh my God,
Right.
these are.
Right. So that's part of
So
it. It's
important.
like, so yeah, you know, you might want to sit back and write a check one day, which I'll always accept checks because it's fundraising time in the Hamptons. But no, you know, come and spend some time. Come spend some time and see what some of these people go through. You know, again, the misconception that people are lazy. I have people carrying their entire worldly belongings with them all day long. Try carrying a big backpack with 2 duffel bags everywhere you go. And by the way, you got to get on a public transportation. You got to walk a half a mile to the bus stop. So
that doesn't run that very often.
right, that misnomer that people are lazy isn't really true at all. But again, I would say, you know, to tap into people of means is to, one, show them where the funding is going. As I mentioned earlier, we're a privately funded nonprofit. So we're not sitting with this huge line budget with $5 million and every nickel and dime is parsed out. You know, if somebody can come into my building and say, well, if I was to give you $5,000, where would it go? You're literally buying boots for somebody. You're literally buying a bus ticket for a person home. You know, you might be helping that family, and that's part of the things that people don't realize. A lot of people think we only work with adults, which is true. Our main focus, typically, especially the winter shelter program, has to be 18 or over. But throughout the course of a year, we work with 15, 20, 25, 30 families that are needed services. So when that family shows up in my building and they have no gas in the car, kid has hardly any clothes, you know, take the debit card, go fill up the gas tank, send them to Walmart, get mom and dad a, you know, decent pair of clothes, go buy the kid a $20 toy. On top of it, go buy $100 worth of groceries. That's where your money's gonna go, right to the people that need it most.
Well, so I think, you know, one of the things that faith communities can offer is a space where you can blend those different groups, right? These relationships Dan is talking about. We can have a Bonnaker sitting there next to somebody who's got a mansion in Southampton, and they're at the same table with an immigrant family, and they're just having coffee together. And then the differences don't really matter when I know your name. Right? When
that would be the ideal.
And I hear your story, you know, so that anything we can do it. I mean, the beauty of East Hampton, the town, is that it is a small town, you know, that you can get to know people. So the more we can do, and I'm talking about my own community, the faith community, but the more we can do it as a wider community to get together and to build those relationships. And it cuts through some of those stereotypes, you know, that scare people away or stop them from helping.
And you mentioned earlier in the last segment about, you know, partnering, and that's something we do a lot of. We believe in partnering with a lot of other nonprofits here on the East End, OLA, Heart of the Hamptons, Cast up on the North Fork, so many organizations we do work with very closely. The Retreat is another organization. We make referrals back and forth all the time. And going back to like the misconception of homeless in the community, we do get the phone calls, and usually the people that are helping us with that are local law enforcement, other concerned citizens. So when you do see a homeless person in Montauk, they're calling us, and usually we're trying to come out to assist. Same thing with East Hampton, the North Fork, Southampton. I mean, I get calls fairly regularly from, you know, a local police department saying, we've got somebody here right now that needs help, what can you do? And more likely, we're going to be the ones responding to that. So we do believe in that kind of partnership. And at the end of the day, it really is trying to get people connected to the services most appropriate for them.
And you mentioned the police earlier, and I want to say something really positive about them, that they are really the people on the front lines. And you have people trained in law enforcement who really have to do social work, you know? And I got to give them a lot of credit, because they are really, what they really try to do is to get people to the right services, and we all work together.
Right.
You know, we just did a big thing at St. Luke's about immigration and about ICE, and well, you know, the mayor showed up, but so did the police chief, and so did a bunch of other people, because we're all in this as a team, right? And so that's just really important, because sometimes you get a negative.
And that's been my experience for the number of years, again, on both North and South Forks, both from the town police as well as the various village polices, that they really are majoritively there to help. You know, they actually genuinely care. I got a call from an older gentleman through South Holt Town Police, and it was 2-3 nights ago, and we have a 70-year-old man who we knew he was on our radar. He ended up with the police trying to help him. I said, listen, we're actually at the Bridgehampton Child Care Recreation Center today. Yeah, that's where we were. I said, if you can get him there. And he said, no problem. So they drove all the way around to help a homeless person, you know, and that's a big thing. You know, that goes a long way to help that individual.
It absolutely does. And the examples you're giving are wonderful. But again, they're not really trained to do that. And there's also, is there some resistance to having mental health workers along with them? I know the same issue is going on in the city as well, of course. How do we break that boundary here? I mean, in other words, the police are they are in a possible role. We've sort of dumped all our social problems on them. Okay, you take care of, you're a psychiatrist, you're the corrections officer, you're this and that, you're the father, you're the mother. It's impossible. I mean, I was in the city just a few days ago, and 2 young kids were going to hop a turnstile, and one of the workers there just let them in. Now you may say, whoa, but she knew what would happen to them. The cops would pick them up, and then it would have been a highly negative experience. So where are we going to bring the police in on this with the training that they want and don't have? So maybe it's a bad term, you know, lousy term, defund the police. It's not about taking funds for anybody, but it's just bringing people together so they can work together and give them the humane response and not escalate it into something that will turn into something violent.
But to that point, it does go beyond sometimes the local law enforcement level. And like I said earlier, I think a lot of the police here in the entire East End have been grateful. And they've just been amazing. They're very patient. You know, they really are trying to make a positive impact. But if you look at, for example, mental health services, there really isn't much immediate mental health services here in the East End. So if you have a person in crisis, mental health crisis, your only option really is to call law enforcement. There are programs that are mobile crisis units and stuff like that, but it takes, they're based in Hauppauge. You know, for them to come from Hauppauge to East Hampton, that's not gonna happen. So who is the crisis unit out here? The police. So that's
Southampton Hospital?
Well, again, so what they're gonna do, they're gonna come, they're gonna try and de-escalate the situation. They're gonna take them to Southampton Hospital, and Southampton Hospital will make a determination whether to keep them or transfer them to another facility, because that would be better suited for somebody with a mental health issue. But I think that's part of it, is certainly here on the East End, again, one of the wealthiest communities in the world, some of those basic services we really are lacking. You know, we don't really have a crisis center, especially like a mobile crisis center, for somebody who's in crisis, you know, again, on the East End. And that sort of leans into the problem on a local level. But again, that's part of it. And we talked a little bit about funding on a larger national level. You cut a lot of these funds. Now, not only are you losing like supportive housing and other safety nets, but now you're gonna have less opportunities for additional support services like mental health crisis response teams and things like that.
That's the disconnect I've heard from both of you. Loads of money out here, we don't have the resources. We don't put it where it can do the best for people.
It's a funny thing. For me, I think the solution though is what we're doing right now. It's talking about it. It's building connections across the board. I mean, the fact that you invited the police and those guys, of course, they should be part of it. We're all part of that conversation.
Absolutely.
because as I was saying before about churches, the same for them. They can't do it all, right? We need to do it all together. I think there's some structural issues. I hate to read, the word taxes or something, but how do you fund these things? How do you make sure we're covered? What's the priority? I mean,
that's the
I
hard
don't have a solution, because what ends up happening is you gotta do your fundraising and I gotta do my fundraising and you got, we're all hitting the same people.
Well, I don't do any fundraising, but no, I understand.
But what we really wanna do is to serve. We really wanna be here.
I get it.
And as I was saying on the break, I think, my goal, I worked in hunger and homelessness for a long time, and my goal of a soup kitchen is not having more people, not feeding more people, but feeding nobody. In other words, not having to have the soup kitchen because nobody's hungry, right? So it's ending hunger. Homelessness, the real solution wouldn't be to have more shelters or something. It'd be no shelters because we don't need them, because we have the supports, mental health services, healthcare, families, whatever you need. If those are there, then we won't need the shelters and we won't need that's a much better solution.
And we're taking care of people, as you've so wonderfully put it, at that spiritual level, at that community level, feeling part of something, really going beyond just giving a meal here and there.
Well, when there's an emergency, you gotta respond, right?
Sure.
Somebody's hungry or they're freezing.
Sure.
You gotta help, right?
Sure.
But how do we change the system so that that doesn't happen in the first place? That's the bigger challenge. And I'm not trying to be the answer person here, except to inspire yourself again by your foundational beliefs, by who you are, right? We have what's called the baptismal covenant of baptism. You say what you believe, but then in our tradition, there's 5 questions. Well, then will you live it out? And that living it out has to do with loving your neighbors yourself and all the stuff we talked about, striving for justice and peace. How do you make it a reality? So I think that's the biggest challenge, because we've got really talented, really smart, really connected people in this community, right? And so I think we have change makers. People want to be on the cutting edge. How can we use that?
I agree totally. I think it's certainly not just the politicians, but the politicians have to also create the policies and respond in the way you're talking about. Make it a kinder, gentler, more humane society by the policies that you're talking about we desperately need. Why they cannot do this or afraid to it's a real quandary. Yeah, and they shouldn't be, because the great majority of people would be for them. They'd get elected and reelected over and over again if they would do that. So, and again, this is not, I agree with you, this is about educating people and raising our level of consciousness and dialogue. This is not about blame and so on. There are wonderful, wonderful people in our community and all over the country and world, but somehow the forces of greed and power and have taken over to the extent that it's ruining it for millions and millions of people. And you said you had been involved in Africa as well, around the world. You see it if we travel. So we've got to,
But I would say
Go ahead.
if Dan's work can change one person's life,
right.
it's worth it, right? You know, you can think globally, but act locally, you know, and so I can't change what's going on, you know, in Washington DC right now, but I can change what's happening right here, right?
Exactly.
And so those ripples, that ripple effect, you know, I think of kindness or whatever it is, you know, I think we can, right?
Totally agree with you, Bob. We have a minute left until you get the last word on this. During the break, you mentioned President Jimmy Carter, Baptist minister, right? Passed away at 100. You said that we came pretty close to politically ending hunger. Now, what made him different? Why did that not really fully happen?
Well, you were talking about politics.
Right,
You were talking
that's
about
but here's a politician who did get it.
But he really tried, and then he embodied that with the Habitat for Humanity work. You know, what is your priority? What is your goal? Right? I mean, I think that's the big question. And underneath that is who are we and what do we want to be and how do we get there? You know, and is it, I started by using that word Ubuntu, I am because we are. Is it all about me or is it about us and what does that look like? You know, Martin Luther King's dream was a dream that was based in his faith, right? And he saw a possibility, so we just need to hold that out.
Totally agree. I want to thank both of you for being here today. This has been really wonderful. It's been a blessing. I applaud you, both of you, in your work. Stay strong, and we'll see you again on The Radical Imagination. This is Jim Vetros. Thank you very much for watching us this week.